talking C. difficile, more common than you probably know, by the way. Stats showing the bacterial infection that strikes 500,000 Americans, 30,000 deaths in the United States of America each and every year. Dr. Zach is back here from the MUHC. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you here. So you were saying to me it is very common. So explain to everybody at home, what is C. difficile, or C. diff, as many people call it?
So C. diff, it's a bacteria that most of us have in our guts, but along with 1,000 other bacteria and trillions of microorganisms. So one of the things this brings up is the balance. You know, we're all covered and infested with different microorganisms, right? That we live in harmony with. And the problem is if one takes over. So C. difficile is one of those bacteria in the gut that can take over, usually after someone's taken a strong antibiotic that kills off other bacteria. And then this one takes over, and it causes a very, very severe colitis, which is inflammation of the bowel, of the colon, which can actually be deadly. I mean, people could end up either having, we usually treat it with very strong antibiotics, but it's a very serious inflammation of the bowel, and sometimes people need to have parts of their bowel taken out, and sometimes, like you said, it can cause death.
And you see this like almost every day, right, at the hospital?
Yeah, it's very, very common. We see probably every single day, we see at least one person who's being treated for C. diff colitis. And it's, so oftentimes they need to be admitted to the hospital for the treatment. And then they have to, oftentimes it's recurrent. So once this bacteria takes over, it's very hard to eradicate. And it's a big problem, yeah.
So antibiotics, of course, is the first line of treatment. But now we're hearing of this fecal transplant, which has an 80 to 90% success rate. So tell us what exactly is this?
So it's a new thing, which many people probably haven't heard of. And it's kind of interesting. But it's basically taking the stool of a healthy person with its healthy number of competing bacteria living in harmony, and transplanting it into the bowel of someone who has C. difficile. And now we can talk about it later. It's being experimented on to see if it can work for other conditions as well. But definitely the one that we know that it works for well is C. difficile colitis. And so it can either be done via colonoscopy. So they put up a colonoscope.
I was going to ask you next how this is transferred to somebody.
That's the most common way. So they put it up your bum, and they sprinkle the healthy stool into your colon. But now they're giving it either via nasogastric or nasoduodenal tube, so the tube that goes in through your nose into your stomach or duodenum. And now, as we were talking about before, also via capsules. So they're actually able to put it in capsules, and you can swallow it, take it like any other medication, and it gets delivered into your colon.
And drug companies, pharmaceutical companies, by the way, I was telling you about the New York Times article that we're going to talk about a little bit later on in the show. The FDA is trying to figure out whether, it really is going to become a drug, because it has to go through a process. It's not as simple as just grabbing somebody's stool.
No, exactly. You have to test it, you have to make sure. And there's a whole concept of super donors. Because some people's stool, apparently they have such a good variety of bacteria and microorganisms in their stool that it's even more effective than other people's, than your just average healthy person's stool. So obviously we want to use those super donors. But you have to, the stool has to be tested to make sure it's not containing things that are actually going to infect the person.
Of course.
Yeah, the person who's actually receiving
get even worse off, right?
Exactly.
What about side effects, right? And we always hear there's side effects to everything. Are there side effects to this transplant?
For sure. So the number one thing, obviously, is what we were talking about, is it has to be properly tested, so you're not giving someone something that they don't want. But then the most common ones are like bloating, abdominal discomfort. Some people get diarrhea, some people get constipation. So it's mainly those kind of side effects, gastrointestinal side effects that people get.
You mentioned other things. So they're also looking at doing a lot of research into this, may be able to help with Alzheimer's, I think. What else? Asthma, MS?
It's very interesting. And what we're learning is how important bacteria are, this balance of bacteria in our body. Years ago, ulcers were all caused by stress, or so we thought, and now we know there's this bacteria H. pylori. So we're learning how important bacteria is. Anyway, we know that there's some good evidence that for ulcerative colitis, another kind of inflammation in the bowel, it can be useful. And now they're looking at other things, so including Alzheimer's disease, diabetes, asthma. There are other ones as well. So they're doing a whole bunch of research to see. I mean, it's very interesting, and maybe in a year or a couple of years we'll be talking about this again as a treatment for many other things.